There's a lot of water on Earth. Seen from space, our blue planet could be called water, not Earth. If water covered neatly the Earth's surface, the whole planet could be covered by a global ocean, 2.5 kilometers deep. Fresh water is defined as all water that isn't derived from the sea. Although water is seemingly a resource that will never run out, not all is actually salvageable, and in fact, only 3% of the Earth's water is fresh water, and 99% of that 3% is locked away in glaciers and polar ice caps. In addition, humankind only has access to 1% of the entire Earth's fresh water, making it extremely limited. 1/3 of the world's population is living in either water-scarce or water-short areas. It is not necessarily overpopulation causing water shortages. 12% of the world's population uses 85% of its water, and these 12% do not live in the third world countries. Clean, safe drinking water is scarce. Today, nearly 1 billion people in the developing world don't have access to it, yet we take it for granted and we waste it, and we even pay money to drink from plastic water bottles. Water is essential for life, and still today, all around the world, far too many people spend their entire day searching for it. In places like sub-Saharan Africa, so much time and effort is lost gathering water, and the people suffer anyways from waterborne diseases. In this graph, it is clear that Africa has the lowest amount of water in general. They have around 63 liters of fresh water per person per day, which accounts for drinking water, cooking water, showering water, etc. It is extremely low compared to North America, whose average is 428 liters per person per day. Without water, no livestock can be grown, and land cannot be cultivated. There is no food without water. But most of the water on Earth is found in seas, and the seawater is salty. A human drinking seawater would die by dehydration as the body could not eliminate extra salt. As well, in industries, it will quickly oxidize any machinery, and removing salt is very expensive. Indian scientist and activist Vandana Shiva noted in a documentary that the water crisis is a human-created crisis only in the last 2 or so decades. In other words, it is not so much of a water shortage crisis, but a water management crisis. For example, poor Indian farmers in Rajasthan are facing water shortages because the Coca-Cola companies had taken so much water from nearby wells.
Lakes are one of the world's most vital freshwater resources, providing water for domestic, agricultural, and industrial uses for our population. The remainder, such as salt water, could not, for the time being, service those purposes we so desperately need to survive. As we said earlier, of the very small percentage of freshwater on Earth, 99% of it is frozen. These days, freshwater encounters many environmental problems such as freshwater augmentation, wastewater and stormwater, eutrophication of lakes, sewage, and public health problems. As water shortage is predicted to worsen in the near future in developing countries, currently between 56 and 65% of inland water systems suitable for use in intensive agriculture in Europe and North America have been drained by 1985. The respective figures for Asia and South America were 27 and 6%. 73% of marshes in northern Greece have been drained since 1930. 60% of the original wetland area of Spain has been lost. The marshes of Iraq lost more than 90% of their original extent between the 1970s and 2002, following a massive and systematic drainage project. Following the fall of the former Iraqi regime in 2003, many drainage structures have been dismantled, and the marshes were reflooded to approximately 58% of their former extent by the end of 2006, with a significant recovery of marsh vegetation. To try and improve these stats and supply fresh water to foreign countries, governments respond to water demand by increasing water supply for urban dwellers, something that is becoming more and more difficult to do since sources of good quality water are much farther in terms of distance from the countries in grave need, making it very expensive to exploit. Abstractions of groundwater could be a solution, although overplumbing has led to saltwater intrusion. Lakes are probably the most vulnerable when it comes to fresh water because of their nature and dynamics. Over time, the pollution of lakes with contaminants such as fertilizers, phosphorus, and nitrogen has caused eutrophication, basically the suffocation of a lake. The animals in the body of water die from lack of oxygen that the overly fed plants have absorbed in their growth with the help of the contaminants. Fertilizers from agriculture and sewage constantly flow directly into our lakes, as well as through rivers and streams. Treatment facilities have been constructed to help solve the problem, but the technology and public participation are simply lacking. Waste and stormwater also tend to go through these facilities if available, but often poor countries do not have access to such help. Cities more vulnerable to flooding must have proper stormwater discharge measures. These systems must be considered when planning urban sewage systems. The pollution stormwater runoff bring is just another environmental problem that further keep our freshwater from being completely pure. In the developing world, about 90% of all sewage water is dumped directly into rivers, lakes, and coastal waters, all without any treatment. To add on to the problem, the amount of water used in those countries is ever growing as their economy transforms. The untreated wastewater has damaged the environment, which is why the need for integrated water management consisting to capture, transportation, treatment, recovery, and discharging is high priority in many of those countries. Over 1 billion people lack access to safe drinking water, while 2 billion lack safe sanitation. Nearly 3 million people die a year from avoidable water-related disease. The number of people in urban and pre-urban places without access to water and sanitation grows with every year that passes, despite the efforts and large investments in water sanitation in the 1980s and 90s.
The Canadian government has taken charge of the situation and is making the necessary measures to try and preserve the little fresh water that we have. An example of the action that the government is taking would be the enforcement in the Laurentians here in Quebec, where one cannot cut their grass 10 meters from the lake to prevent fertilizers from entering. Federal water policy, the first of its kind in Canada, was created after several years. It addresses the management of water resources, balancing water uses with the requirement of the many interrelationships within the ecosystem. The policy takes into account the needs of all Canadians in its overall objective, to ensure the use of fresh water in an efficient and equitable manner consistent with the social, economic, and environmental needs of present and future generations. To manage Canada's water resources, the federal government has defined two main goals. Firstly, to protect and enhance the quality of water resources. Secondly, to promote the wise and efficient management and use of water. Another example of the government's limitations is that the city of Dollar-des-Ormeaux is limited to watering their lawns and other vegetation between May 15th and September 15th. During that period, citizens who wish to water their lawns and gardens must respect certain restrictions. Not respecting these provisions could lead to fines, as well as watering hours is from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. when watering is allowed. For those who have pools, one annual fill-up is permitted between midnight and 6 a.m. Any additional fill-up requires a special permit.
Humans need to realize that freshwater is running low. Although freshwater is partially renewable resource, it is very expensive to filter and treat, and we're using a lot more than we need way too quickly. People in less fortunate countries struggle every day just to be able to get a fraction of the water that North Americans get on a daily basis. Many environmental problems also limit the amount of water we have left. Excess fertilizers going into lakes cause eutrophication, which suffocates lakes, while other problems range from dumping our wastewater directly into freshwater to not properly managing stormwater. Political policies have been put into place to help preserve water by enforcing laws. Consequences will be given to those who don't abide by these laws. We only have access to 1% of all of our planet's water. Let's make the most out of it and preserve it for the generations to come.